In MMA, there are predators. In the fierce featherweight division, where speed meets power, only the most relentless survive. Some intimidate with their physique, others with their technique, but there are those who instill fear for an even greater reason: their indomitable will. Few dare to leave behind a stable life to enter the hell of the octagon and emerge as a true legend. Today we have a fighter who belongs to the category of relentless monsters. None other than Alexander Volkanovski, the Great, who embodies all these characteristics. Alexander Volkanovski is not just a champion, he is a man who defied all expectations. From being a nearly 100-kilogram rugby player to becoming the undisputed king of the featherweights. With inhuman endurance, devastating strikes, and a tactical mind like few others, Volkanovski became the terror of his division. His style? Constant pressure, brutal speed, and an almost impenetrable defense. Today, we bring you the price of success of Alexander Volkanovski, the former rugby player who became a demolition machine, the warrior who challenged giants, and the man who refuses to give up. Against the odds. His story begins in Wollongong, Australia, a coastal city known for its hard-working spirit and fighting culture. But although he was born in Australia, his blood carries the roots of a warrior nation. His parents were immigrants from Macedonia, a place where discipline, family, and toughness are fundamental values. From a young age, Volkanovski was different. He wasn't the biggest nor the strongest, but he had something that made him stand out: an unbreakable determination. From a very young age, Volkanovski trained in Greco-Roman wrestling, a sport that developed his control, strength, and ability to dominate opponents much bigger than him. But when he left rugby, he found a new obsession: mixed martial arts. Before becoming the UFC featherweight champion, Alexander was nothing more than a 100-kilogram man dominating rugby. But what few know is that this seemingly unstoppable athlete had a much bigger battle than any of his opponents could imagine. The most important decision of his life was not made in the octagon, but in his own choice to leave behind a career in rugby at 22 years old. A safe and stable life. His leap into mixed martial arts was not just a change of sport. It was a challenge to himself. He started with Muay Thai, perfected his boxing, and over time became a grappling monster, combining all the skills necessary to triumph in the cage. But his path to success was not easy. From the beginning, Volkanovski was underestimated. No one expected someone of his size to have a place in a sport where agility and speed are essential. And even more so when he would face the giants of the octagon. But Volkanovski not only defied the expectations of others, but also those of his own body. The controversy lay in his constant struggle against prejudices that labeled him as too small to compete in a division like the featherweights. At 1.68 meters tall, many looked at him and thought he would be devoured by the giants of the octagon. But history was about to be written. The beginnings. Volkanovski began his career in the regional MMA circuit. His first fights were not easy, but each victory granted him one more piece of the puzzle that would lead him to greatness. In fact, in his first 13 fights, Volkanovski remained undefeated. Every opponent fell before his unstoppable strength and cold strategy. But what really set him apart was his mentality. That iron will that allowed him to keep going, no matter the sacrifices. His ability to stay on his feet, even when fatigue seemed to overcome him, led him to stand out quickly in the regional circuit. However, he was still missing the big opportunity that would catapult him to the biggest stage of all, the UFC. When he finally arrived in the UFC, many thought that his dream would be shattered when facing the best in the division. In his debut, Alexander faced Yair Rodriguez, a fighter with an impressive record and an explosive style. It was a trial by fire, a fight that could make or break his career. The critics said that Volkanovski did not have what it takes to compete with the giants of the UFC. But he had already proven that size was never an obstacle for a man determined to win. Before becoming the king of the featherweight division, Volkanovski had to prove that he could face the most dangerous veterans of the division. And Chad Mendes was exactly that, a former title contender with explosive wrestling skills and brutal knockout power. The fight began with Mendes showcasing his experience, landing powerful punches and taking Volkanovski down multiple times. But what no one expected was the Australian's resilience. In the second round, Volkanovski turned the fight around, punishing Mendes with precise strikes until leaving him with no answers. With a brutal TKO, Volkanovski not only won the fight, but announced his arrival to the elite of the UFC. That night, the world began to notice something special about Volkanovski. No matter how hard he gets hit, he always finds a way to come back. His biggest rival. But the real problem for Alexander Volkanovski was not just his victories, but what happened next. During his reign, rumors of conflicts with other champions began to stir. Was he really the best, or just a man whom luck favored? The rivalry with Max Holloway marked one of the most intense moments of his career. It was a matchup that many anticipated, and few believed possible. Alexander Volkanovski against Max Holloway, the undisputed featherweight champion. Two warriors with completely different styles, but with a burning passion for victory. In the octagon, more than a title would be defined. The legacy of who truly dominated the featherweight division would be defined. Volkanovski entered the octagon with something Holloway had never faced before: an intensity and impeccable strategy. Throughout the first round, Volkanovski began to demonstrate something that surprised everyone: his ability to counter Holloway's frenetic style. Withstanding the attacks and responding with precise counterattacks. In the exchange, Volkanovski landed several clean shots, including some powerful ones that made Holloway stagger. The third round was undoubtedly the most decisive. Volkanovski, with a mindset of steel, did the unthinkable. He took the fight to a level of intensity that Holloway did not expect. It was the moment when Volkanovski began to rack up points and effectively wear down the champion, giving him little room to breathe. Pressing with quick hand combinations and precise strikes that started to mark Holloway's face. The combination of power punches, along with his control of octagon, it was becoming clear that Volkanovski was dominating the rounds. The fifth and final round showed two men with their lungs at the limit. But Volkanovski never slowed down. With Holloway giving what was left of his strength, he maintained his control, closing the fight with an undisputed victory, a victory of strategy, technique, and will. The judge, in the end, had no doubt. Alexander Volkanovski had defeated the champion, Max Holloway, and was crowned the new featherweight king. Throughout the 5 intense rounds, Volkanovski appeared stronger, more agile, and more strategic than his opponent. His control of the octagon was absolute. Although Holloway kept attacking, the champion was under constant pressure, unable to find a breather. Holloway's gaze, which used to intimidate his opponents, no longer had the same shine. Volkanovski, with his relentless fighting style, was dismantling the man who had reigned for so long. Versus Brian Ortega. If there was one fight that showcased Volkanovski's heart and resilience, it was his bout against Brian Ortega. The challenge was clear. Ortega had the most dangerous jiu-jitsu in the division. If he managed to catch Volkanovski in a submission, the fight would end in seconds. In the third round, the worst possible scenario happened. Ortega caught Volkanovski in a guillotine choke. The champion was trapped, out of breath, and it seemed like the fight was over. But then, The impossible happened. Volkanovski survived. Somehow he broke free from the submission, escaped, and began to brutally punish Ortega until the end of the round. The crowd was in shock. How had he survived that? Ortega attempted another submission afterward, but Volkanovski escaped again. After 5 rounds, Volkanovski proved that he was not just a great fighter, but a true warrior. He defended his title and made it clear that no one would dethrone him easily. His toughest fight. Just when we thought his story was already written, the greatest fight of all arrived. His showdown with Islam Makhachev, the lightweight champion. The battle was not only physical, but psychological. Volkanovski, who had been invincible in his division, had to face a rival that many considered more complete, more dominant. The criticism was relentless. They met for the first time on February 12, 2023, not just for a title, but for the right to be considered the best fighter in the world, regardless of weight class. A clash of styles, of mentalities, and of a mutual respect that was about to be put to the test in the octagon. The first round began with Makhachev looking to impose his style. Volkanovski, however, did not let himself be dragged into his opponent's game, and despite Makhachev's attempts to take him down, Volkanovski resisted with strength and cunning, defending takedown attempts and looking for opportunities to strike on the feet. The second round was even more tense. Makhachev, knowing that Volkanovski was not going to give in easily, began using his wrestling more aggressively. But Volkanovski showed an amazing ability to recover positions and counter. The Australian, being shorter in height, used his speed and anticipation to stay out of Makhachev's reach. As the fight neared its end, it became evident that Volkanovski had achieved something few expected. He had matched or even surpassed Makhachev in certain aspects of the fight, but in the final round, the wear and tear of the fight took its toll, and Makhachev seized the opportunity to take control with a couple of dangerous exchanges. However, Volkanovski showed no signs of surrendering. Finally, after a war that shook the octagon, the judges declared Islam Makhachev the winner by unanimous decision. Despite the defeat, Volkanovski proved to the world that he not only belongs in the UFC elite, but is a force to be reckoned with in any division. The fight was a spectacle of resilience, skill, and heart. Volkanovski, the featherweight champion, had given everything in his attempt to become a double champion, and although he didn't succeed that night, his legacy as one of the greatest warriors in UFC history was absolutely sealed. The second fight between Alexander Volkanovski and Islam Makhachev took place on October 21, 2023, at UFC 294 in Abu Dhabi. This rematch was highly anticipated, as their first encounter at UFC 284 had been a close war, where Makhachev won by unanimous decision, albeit with some controversy. However, this second fight was completely different. Initially, Makhachev was scheduled to face Charles Oliveira at UFC 294, but less than 2 weeks before the event, Oliveira suffered a cut on his eyebrow during training and was forced to withdraw. In response, Volkanovski accepted the fight on just 11 days' notice, despite not being in an active training camp. Despite the short preparation time, Volkanovski was confident that he could correct the mistakes of the first fight and defeat the lightweight champion. From the beginning of the first round, Makhachev was much more aggressive than in their first fight. The Dagestani fighter launched kicks to the body and landed clean punches. Volkanovski, for his part, tried to stay mobile and find his distance, but he failed to establish his rhythm due to Makhachev's constant pressure. The decisive moment came at 3 minutes and 6 seconds of the first round. Makhachev landed a brutal head kick that connected perfectly on the right side of Volkanovski's skull. The impact left him completely dazed, and although he tried to react, Makhachev finished him off with ground strikes until the referee stopped the fight. Islam Makhachev won by knockout in the first round, defending his lightweight title decisively. After the fight, Volkanovski admitted that he was not in the best condition due to the lack of proper training. However, he said that he did not regret accepting the fight. Fans praised Volkanovski's courage, but many also questioned whether he should have taken the fight on such short notice. His history with Ilia Topuria. The rivalry between Ilia Topuria and Alexander Volkanovski marked a pivotal moment in the history of the UFC featherweight division. Their only fight to date took place at UFC 298 on February 17, 2024 in Anaheim, California. Before this fight, Alexander Volkanovski was the reigning featherweight champion and one of the most dominant fighters in the division's history. He had defended his title several times with victories over big names like Max Holloway, Brian Ortega, and Chan Sung Jung. After his loss to Makhachev, he decided to return to his division to defend his belt against a new challenger, Ilia Topuria. Topuria had been outspoken in his pre-fight statements, claiming that he was going to dethrone Volkanovski and prove that he was the best fighter in the division. In the second round, Ilia Topuria came out more aggressive, closing the distance with fast and powerful combinations. Volkanovski tried to use his experience and movement to avoid getting caught, but Topuria found his perfect opportunity. At 3 minutes and 32 seconds of the second round, Topuria landed a devastating right hand that connected cleanly on Volkanovski's jaw. The champion collapsed to the ground, visibly dazed, and Topuria wasted no time finishing him off with ground strikes until the referee stopped the fight. With this technical knockout, Ilia Topuria became the new UFC featherweight champion, dethroning Volkanovski and keeping his undefeated record intact. With this victory, Ilia Topuria established himself as the best fighter in the division, capturing the belt and earning the respect of fans and MMA analysts. The highly anticipated rematch between Ilia Topuria and Alexander Volkanovski was initially scheduled to headline UFC 314 in April 2025. However, on February 20th, 2025, it was announced that Topuria decided to vacate the featherweight title to move up to the lightweight division, leaving the championship vacant. As a result, the main event of UFC 314 was changed to a fight between Alexander Volkanovski and Diego Lopes for the vacant featherweight title. His legacy, Volkanovski's rise, was unstoppable. Every fight, every victory brought him closer to the top. He defeated legends, giants of the division, and finally, in December 2019, he claimed the UFC featherweight championship, defeating Max Holloway, the man many considered the greatest of all time in that division. And so, the story of Alexander Volkanovski continues to be written. Between victories, doubts, sacrifices, and shadows, the criticisms surrounding him have never been about his skill in the octagon, but about the price of success he had to pay on his journey to glory. The question remains, is hard work what made him the best? Or is he simply a lucky man? Leave us your answer in the comments and tell us which fighter you'd like to learn more about. Subscribe for more.